Earlier this week, United, who famously overbooks all of their flights, overbooked another one of their flights, and then they had to have 4 of their employees fly along. So they said what they, when you go into a gate at check-in and they'll ask you like, hey, we have a voucher for $800 or whatever, please come to the front if you want to take that money and take a later flight. No one came up except for 2 volunteers, and then they still needed 2 more spaces. So what United decided to do was, we're gonna randomly kick someone out of the plane. And that person was violently taken away by official authorities. We're gonna take a look at the video and then we're gonna talk about it.
This is so
Hey, come on. There you go.
Hey, you busted his lip.
Oh my God, look at what you did to him. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Good work. Way to go.
So the man being dragged away is Dr. David Dow. He's a 69-year-old Vietnamese American. He was being dragged away in front of his wife, and as you can see, when they yank him out of the chair, he actually he slams his head across the aisle on the other armrest and is concussed. He passes out, and then he's dragged away. Not even a moment of pausing in between those 2 instances. Not a single person goes, oh, wait a minute, like, should we maybe check up on him to make sure he's okay? Oh, by the way, they knew that he was a doctor. His reasoning for why he couldn't leave the flight was because he had to get to his patients, and he mentioned that multiple times.
He had appointments the next day.
Yeah, he had appointments the next day. He could not be late to it. Now, but that isn't even a reason. Like, you shouldn't ever be able to kick away a law-abiding citizen, whether this person was a doctor or any other race or anything. Like, none of that matters, because there are a lot of instances where we see people getting kicked off of flights for being disruptive, or United, the same United that got flack only last week for 2 teenagers wearing leggings.
Well, just last week, Haas, we did the story on the 11 reasons that can get you kicked off of a flight.
I know, Grace, it's almost like you knew what was about to happen. But we didn't know that you could just get randomly selected and kicked off of a flight because United overbooked their flights.
So, as I understand, the CEO of United has released a statement.
Yes.
And that has also gotten a lot of flack as well.
So, originally United instantly came back and apologized from their Twitter account, but they didn't apologize to Dr. David Dow. They apologized for overbooking the flight, which is crazy, but I also understand why they did that, because they wanted to shift the blame away from United to the authorities. They wanted to say, if there's any other problems that you experienced or if anything terrible happened, please discuss it with the proper authorities. And they talked to Chicago, like BuzzFeed reached out to Chicago police went back to TSA. So it's basically this like he said, she said, who's to blame here, we don't know situation. But the real problem that I think, the real gross injustice here is the fact that they overbooked the flight. Yes, there was the police were very violent. The officials were very violent with Dr. David Dow. They should have been a lot more sensitive. But I talked about this in that story as well, whereas like we have this way heightened sense of fear because it's flight, even though it's something almost as commonplace as public transportation at this point. It's almost like taking a bus somewhere. But I don't understand why. Like, why can't they handle the situation in a amicable way?
I don't really think the incentive has been there. Now, I think the heat is really going to come down on United after these events and how everything was picked up on social media. But it's sort of, they have like an inelastic demand. Like we've talked about this before, you're always going to pay for the cheapest flight to get you from point A from point B if you need to get somewhere, even if it is United. I saw a lot on Twitter, people saying, wow, I'm really like scared and shook by this United story. That being said, I'm flying United next week because it was the cheapest flight and I'm gonna take my chances. And I think that United knows that, and they are a major international airline, so they're different than like a Southwest. The checks and balance system, I think, has totally been out of whack with them, and now it sort of came to a boiling point in a very upsetting and public way.
You bring up a really good point as far as regulation and checks and balances. Now, there are multiple reasons why United and airlines can behave this way. In the consumer index, when you look at favorability ratings, airlines are usually very low. They're like they are right below ISPs, internet service providers like Comcast or Time Warner, and there's a reason for that. It's not or public utility. So like public utility like energy or water.
Yeah, because they don't need to provide good service. We need them anyway.
There is an economic reason behind that. And that reason is that these marketplaces are very prone to naturally not have a lot of competition, meaning the natural barriers of entry in these markets are very high. So you can't have a lot of different actors. Like, let's say there's a soda company, right? You could totally be a disruptive soda company, meaning a smaller soda company that comes out of nowhere, like SodaStream, let's say, and decides like, we're gonna take over this industry. You can kind of do that because the barrier of entry isn't as high. It's not as expensive to get into this market.
Yeah.
Whereas with airlines, it's incredibly difficult. And then on top of that, larger companies constantly buy out other smaller ones, like or they merge so that they can become somewhat more competitive. But right now, in 70% of all domestic travel is basically completely controlled by the top 3 to 4 airlines. So that's crazy. There's not, and in a lot of marketplaces, usually there's only one or two companies, airlines can go there. So that creates this weird, and it's the exact same concept as ISPs. Like in a lot of places, you can either get Verizon or you can get Spectrum. Like there's no other options. And because of that, they can provide whatever kind of customer service they want to, and they can cut back costs and constantly increase the price, and you really don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice because you become dependent on it.
And because of that, with public utility, with energy, with water, even if it's run by a private company, which the government usually will, give away contracts to private companies to handle, Department of Water and whatnot in certain areas, they're still heavily regulated by local authorities or federal government. And they should do the exact same thing with airlines. They should do the exact same things with ISPs, so that given that I'm explaining this, like I'm trying to explain a complicated economic concepts such as oligopolies and how they form, or monopolies and how they form, and why the government needs to regulate it. I don't know if I'm doing a good job or not.
You're doing great.
But I wanted to I guess what I wanted to say is like the reason why the government needs to regulate these markets, these industries, is because it's very difficult for these industries to be truly competitive. Because a lot of people will say free market economy. Like you just take your dollars elsewhere. But just like you mentioned, in a lot of instances you can't. If you live in Kansas and United is the only plane that flies out of there, then you have to take United. There's no other, what are you gonna do? Not take air travel? It's insane.
Yeah, well, I also think that unlike other scandals where passengers have been removed from flights or kicked off flights or not allowed to board flights in the past, I think that this one has potential staying power for United. I think it's given them a major PR disaster. And while in the past, we've talked about, I don't think it's really going to affect air travel. I think there's a chance that this could affect how people choose their flights moving forward, because I know I'm going to London at the end of this month, and I was conferencing with my friend. We're like, we're not taking United, right? Like the video is so unsettling to watch. It was so mishandled on every level that I'm cool with not flying United for a while, even if I have to pay, an extra $40 or $50 for a Delta flight.
Just to be clear though, before we go, one final note, just to be clear, what the CEO is doing right now seems gross. And it is gross. And it's kind of funny that he is so business oriented that he's completely lost touch with that humane element that us normal humans have. And what he's trying to do is separate himself from the blame. He's trying to separate United as a brand from the blame, and ironically doing a really terrible job at it and making it worse for his company overall, making it worse for his brand's reputation overall. What's happening, right? Because the reason why he's not accepting blame is so that he can shift the blame over to the authorities without directly coming out and being like, well, the police handled it. This is not an instance where United did anything wrong. This is police brutality. He's not saying that, but he's trying to signal towards that. But he's doing a really bad job of it, and also because this is so obviously horrible. And by the way, I heard somewhere that their original thought process behind it was that the man slipped and fell. That's what the police said. Luckily, there was video evidence that was not the case. That's like what domestic abusers use as to hide what they're doing. Like, it's no different than that, Chicago. That's fucked up. But anyway, do you have any more thoughts on this?
No.
Okay, well, we want to hear from you guys. Would you actually not travel United because of this video? Be honest. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm Hasan and Grace Baldridge, and we'll see you next time on Pop Trigger.